Here's something that almost nobody says out loud. There's a specific decade in your life, not your 20s, not your 30s, where the financial decisions you make or fail to make quietly determine the rest of your story. Not dramatically, not obviously, just slowly, like a river that splits somewhere in the middle of a valley. From the air, the two paths look almost identical for a while. Same water, same current, but one eventually flows into something calm and wide and open, and the other narrows into something smaller, faster, more stressful. That split happens in your 40s. And the uncomfortable thing is, most people living inside that decade right now don't feel like they're at a fork in the road. They feel like they're managing, like they're doing fine, like they've figured most of it out. And that's exactly the problem. Because doing fine and building towards something real are two very different financial positions. And by the time most people understand the difference, they're already in their mid-50s. And the math, the cold, indifferent math, has already made a lot of decisions for them. So today, we're going to talk about that math. We're going to talk about a real person, not a millionaire, not someone who made dramatic mistakes, just a regular, working, responsible adult living to their 40s in a way that most people do. And we're going to look at where their money actually goes, what it's actually doing, and what the difference looks like 20 years later. No hype, no blame, just clarity. Let me introduce you to someone. We'll call him David. David is 42 years old. He lives outside Charlotte, North Carolina. He works in project management for a mid-sized logistics company. He's been there 9 years. He's reliable, he's respected, and he earns $78,000 a year. After federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, David takes home roughly $57,500 a year, about $4,790 a month. That's a solid income. Not wealthy by any measure, but solidly middle class by most American standards. His wife, Sarah, works part-time in healthcare administration. She brings home about $1,800 a month. So together, their household take-home is roughly $6,590 per month. Now here's where it gets interesting. Their mortgage on a 3-bedroom house they bought in 2019 is $1,640 a month. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance all bundled together. That's reasonable. They didn't stretch. They have 2 cars. One is mostly paid off, just $220 a month remaining. The other, a 2022 SUV they leased 2 years ago, runs them $489 a month. They have a Visa card with a $4,200 balance. Minimum payment is $95. But they usually pay around $150. David also has a student loan from his MBA. He went back to school in his mid-30s, thinking it would accelerate his career. It did, somewhat, but he still owes $21,000 on it. Monthly payment is $310. They have 2 kids, one in middle school, one just started high school. Between school supplies, extracurriculars, sports fees, and the occasional family weekend, that's another $600 to $800 a month, depending on the season. Groceries, utilities, internet, streaming services, a gym membership David uses inconsistently, roughly $1,400 a month. They eat out about twice a week. Nothing fancy. Casual restaurants, sometimes takeout. That runs about $350 to $400 a month. And they take one family vacation a year. Last year it was a week in Florida. About $3,200 total, divided across a year. Roughly $267 a month as an average cost. Now let's add that up. Mortgage, $1,640. Cars, $709. Credit card, $150. Student loan, $310. Kids, $700. Groceries and living, $1,400. Dining, $375. Vacation saving, $267. That's $5,551 a month. They bring home $6,590. That leaves them $1,039 a month. Now, David contributes 4% to his 401k at work, just enough to get his employer's 3% match. That comes out as paycheck before take home. So it's about $260 a month going into retirement savings. That leaves about $779 in actual discretionary money each month. But here's the thing about discretionary money in your 40s. It doesn't stay discretionary for long. The water heater goes. The car needs brakes. The kid needs new cleats and then a new laptop for school. The insurance deductible hits. Something always absorbs it. And so by the end of most months, David and Sarah aren't really saving anything beyond that 401k contribution. They're not losing. They're not drowning. But they're not building either. They're running in place. And they don't think this is a crisis, because by every visible measure, it isn't. They own a home. They have retirement contributions. Their kids are taken care of. They go on vacation. From the outside, this looks like success. Here's the mistake. And it's not the vacation. It's not the SUV lease. It's not even the dining out. The mistake is the rate of building. David is 42. If the average American retires around 65, he has roughly 23 years left. That sounds like a lot. It feels like a lot. But watch what happens when we actually do the math. David is putting away $260 a month into his 401k. His employer matches 3%, which adds another roughly $195 a month. So total monthly contribution to retirement is approximately $455. Now, let's be fair and assume a 7% average annual return, a standard, historically backed assumption for a diversified stock portfolio over the long run. $455 a month at 7% over 23 years. That gives David approximately $296,000 at retirement. That's not nothing. That's genuinely not nothing. But here's the other number. Financial planners widely use what's called the 4% withdrawal rule as a sustainable income model for retirement. The idea is that you can withdraw 4% of your retirement savings each year without depleting the principal too quickly. 4% of $296,000 is $11,840 a year. That is $986 a month from savings. David will also likely receive Social Security, based on his earnings history, probably somewhere around $1,600 to $1,800 a month in today's dollars, assuming he retires at full retirement age. So in retirement, David's income would look something like $2,600 to $2,800 a month. His current take-home is $4,790. Just his portion alone. The drop is not a small adjustment. It's a restructuring of lifestyle that most people in their 40s haven't mentally processed yet. Now here's where Europe enters this conversation. The numbers are different, but the story is the same. Take Marcus. He's 44. He lives just outside Frankfurt, Germany. He works in IT consulting. After taxes and social contributions, which are higher in Germany than the US, he takes home about 3,100 euros a month. Germany has a strong public pension system, the gesetzliche Rentenversicherung, and Marcus will receive a state pension. But the German pension system, like most European public pension systems, is built on the assumption of continuous, full-time employment across decades. Career gaps, part-time years, freelance periods, all of these reduce the final pension calculation significantly. Marcus had a few contract years in his early 30s. He contributed less during those years. His projected state pension, based on his points accumulated, will likely be somewhere around 1,300 to 1,500 euros a month in today's values. His current lifestyle costs about 2,700 euros a month to maintain. Same gap, different currency, same problem. And Marcus, like David, is not failing. He's just not building fast enough to land somewhere comfortable. He's building towards something that will require him to dramatically shrink his life in the 60s, or keep working into his late 60s in ways he hasn't fully imagined yet. So why doesn't David just save more? It's a reasonable question. And the answer isn't laziness. It isn't stupidity. And it certainly isn't that he doesn't care about his future. The answer is something behavioral economists call present bias. The human brain is wired, genuinely, biologically wired, to place disproportionate value on what's happening now, and to systematically undervalue what will happen 20 years from now. Retirement at 65 feels abstract when you're 42. It's not real in the way that the mortgage payment is real. It's not urgent the way the car lease is urgent. The future version of David, the 65-year-old sitting somewhere with fixed income, that person doesn't feel like him. Not really. Studies in behavioral finance have actually shown that when people see digitally aged photos of themselves, they increase their retirement savings because suddenly the future person becomes real to them, connected. But without that cognitive bridge, the 40-something brain makes a very logical feeling decision. Handle the present, assume the future will work itself out, and push the heavy lifting of financial planning to next year. And next year comes. And the exact same reasoning applies. There's also something else at play. In your 40s, something changes socially that didn't exist in your 20s or even early 30s. You begin to see what your peers have, and in a way that you didn't notice when everyone was young and broke together. The comparisons get sharper. Your colleague got a BMW. Your neighbor redid their kitchen. Your sister's family just got back from 2 weeks in Portugal. And without even consciously deciding to, you start making small financial adjustments to maintain a sense of equivalence. The lease on the nicer SUV, the kitchen renovation that goes on the home equity line of credit, the private summer camp for the kids because other kids in the neighborhood are going. None of these are extravagant individually. Together, they quietly absorb the money that was supposed to be building something. This is what researchers call lifestyle lock-in. You're not spending recklessly. You're spending consistently with your identity, with your peer group, with what feels appropriate for someone at your stage of life. And that's precisely what makes it so hard to see from the inside, because it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like living. Let's run 2 versions of the next 20 years. David at 42, same income, same expenses. Version 1, he stays on his current path. $455 a month into retirement. No meaningful changes. Life rolls forward the way it has been. He retires at 65. We already did this math. He lands somewhere around $296,000 in savings. About $2,600 to $2,800 a month in combined income. His mortgage will likely be paid off by then. That helps, but his health care costs will have risen. His car costs won't disappear. And he'll be entering the most medically expensive decades of his life on a relatively thin margin. It's survivable. But survivable is a long way from comfortable. Version 2. At 42, David makes one significant, non-dramatic change. He increases his 401k contribution from 4% to 10% of his gross salary. That's an additional $390 a month coming out of his paycheck, which, because 401k contributions reduce taxable income, doesn't actually reduce his take-home by the full $390 after the tax benefit. He feels it as roughly $280 to $300 less per month in take-home pay. That's real. That's felt. That means fewer dinners out, a slightly more modest vacation, maybe keeping the older car an extra year instead of leasing new. But now his total monthly retirement contribution, his contribution plus employer match, is roughly $845 a month. $845 a month. 7% return. 23 years. He now lands at approximately $550,000 at retirement. 4% of $550,000 is $22,000 a year, about $1,833 a month from savings. Add Social Security, roughly $2,600 to $3,400 a month combined income in retirement. That is a completely different retirement. Not extravagant, but genuinely comfortable. Able to travel occasionally. Able to help his kids. Able to handle medical surprises without crisis. The difference between those two futures is $280 a month. Roughly 1 restaurant dinner a week. That's the math. And that math only works as powerfully because of time. And his 40s are the last decade where he still has enough of it. By 55, running the same calculation gets significantly harder. The compounding period shrinks. The required monthly savings to hit the same number nearly doubles. The 40s are not just another decade. They are, for most working people, the last high-leverage window. Now let's talk about what actually separates people who land in a good financial position in their 60s from people who don't. It is almost never income. There are plenty of people earning $120,000, $150,000 a year who retire within savings. And there are people who earn $60,000 their whole careers who land with genuine financial stability. The difference, when you study it honestly, comes down to one thing: not discipline, not sacrifice, not some unusual willpower. It comes down to how clearly and how consistently they held a picture of the future version of themselves in mind while making present-day decisions. Financially intelligent people in their 40s don't think of retirement savings as money they're giving up. They think of it as income they're delivering to their future self. It's a subtle reframe, but it changes everything. When David thinks about increasing his 401k contribution, his brain frames it as a loss. $280 less to spend this month, and loss aversion is powerful. The pain of losing $280 feels larger than the abstract gain of a more comfortable retirement decade away. But when someone has genuinely internalized a clear picture of the future, not as a vague someday, but as a real, specific life they're either building or not building, the framing reverses. The sacrifice isn't giving up dinner. The sacrifice is choosing a smaller retirement for the price of a few meals a week. Put that way, almost no one would consciously make that trade. But without that clarity, almost everyone does. Financially intelligent people in their 40s also do something that sounds almost obvious once you hear it. They separate their identity from their spending. They don't need the car they drive to communicate their success. They don't need the kitchen renovation to feel like they've arrived. They build enough internal clarity about where they're going that they don't need the external markers as confirmation. This is an austerity. It isn't frugality for its own sake. They still enjoy their lives. They just enjoy them in ways that don't quietly consume the thing they're actually building. And critically, they made these decisions in their 40s, not in their 20s, which would have been easier, but also when they had less to work with, in their 40s, when incomes are typically at or near their peak, when the kids are older and some expenses are shrinking, when the mortgage is partway paid down. The 40s are, strangely, a second financial window. Not the first one. That one was the 20s, when compounding starts earliest. But the second one, and in many ways the most consequential one, because it's the last one with enough runway to make a real difference. David is not a cautionary tale. He's not a failure. He hasn't made reckless choices. He's done what most responsible adults do. He's managed a complicated life with the information and habits he has. But responsible and financially prepared are not the same thing. And the difference between them, in his case, in the case of millions of people across the United States and Europe, often comes down to a single decade where the leverage is highest, the clarity is most needed, and the noise of life is also loudest. The mortgage, the kids, the careers, the social comparisons, the fatigue of just managing everything. The 40s are full. They are genuinely full. And that fullness is exactly why it's so easy to push the financial reckoning forward, to the 50s, when there'll be more room, to the 60s, when things will be clearer. But the math doesn't pause while you wait for more room. It just keeps running. The point isn't to scare you. The point is simply this. The image of retirement as something that works out for people who more or less try is statistically generous. For most people, it doesn't just work out. It reflects, with remarkable precision, the decisions made in the years between roughly 40 and 55. That window is either open right now, or it recently opened, which means the decisions made in the next few years, not in some abstract future, but in the next 12 to 24 months, carry real, compounding, irreversible weight. Not panic, just awareness. Because awareness, calm and honest and unhurried, is where every good financial decision actually begins. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, the kind that doesn't try to sell you a feeling, just shows you mechanics clearly, then subscribing would mean we can keep making it. That's all. Take care of yourself. Think clearly.